make a move and the bunny gets it.
I said, put the bunny back in the box. Why couldn't you put the bunny back in the box?
It's showtime.
Roar. Roar.
Colonel Ironsides here. 200 years I stood in the gap, fighting those who would harm my country. It was my honor, my sacred duty, so help me God. 9 times they took my life. 9 times I stood back up and made them pay. The freedom fighter and I could handle anything, but someone betrayed me. I was ambushed, made mortal, rendered powerless, and retired. They passed an amendment and made me a civilian before I left the hospital. For 50 years I watched my country change. Watched this work while erasing me from history. The day I quit my job, I powered up and discovered they lied about that too. I'll remind them of freedom. I'll remind them of duty. I'll remind them of their oaths and who they serve. I'll remind them while I'm shoving it down their throats.
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
I wanna know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I wanna know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Okay, sorry. Looks like I got muted there. Anyway. Man, I am bleached out. Hold on. Alright, that's better. Okay, I haven't done a Gen X Files in a while. My Gen X show is supposed to be commenting on pop culture from the generation for which it was written. That would be Gen X. And now, there was a man named Andrew Breitbart. And one of his most famous declarations was he said that, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us this, that, and the other thing. And war. I declare war. you know. And basically, he was just talking about how that they were going to push back, and they weren't just going to take it anymore. And a lot of people believe that he is the godfather of the MAGA, whatever MAGA is, whatever you want to call it. People have different ideas of what it is. It came out of the Tea Party movement, and then kind of coalesced around a certain presidential candidate who became president in 2016. Now, the person who the whole entire media apparatus, the whole entire powers that be had kind of earmarked for the presidency was a certain lady who happened to be ex-president's wife. I'll just say that. Whether she has a body count or not is irrelevant to this situation, this conversation. But anyway, so around that time, they didn't get their way. They thought they had the whole entire thing rigged, and they believed that that they could determine or choose who the candidate was going to be, and up to that point, the previous two presidential elections, they kind of had controlled opposition. And who made the mistakes that, when they wanted them to make the mistakes. And it's so, but the problem was this candidate came from completely outside the system, wasn't playing by the rules, and was completely upsetting the apple cart. Okay. Now, up to this point, things were slanted. They always had a slant. But at the same time, they would allow other points of view, other perspectives. They would allow for some diversity of thought. Diversity in the writers' rooms, diversity in the casting, in that if it was appropriate for a cast to be all one shade as opposed to another, then it would be allowed. If something was historically accurate, they would have the appropriate casting. Okay. The gender roles weren't blurred that much back then. Now, there was some alternative lifestyles in our media, but you could count them on one hand. You could kind of they were kind of segregated in a way. And so people who wanted that media could consume that media, and they could choose not to. And around this time, there was some traditional IPs, intellectual properties, that people from all walks of life, from all regions, from all political ideologies, from all mindsets could enjoy, because they were pure entertainment. And they were written with entertainment in mind, with storytelling in mind. Now, some of this stuff that we later came to call WOKE was already in society, was already in the zeitgeist, as it were. I think comics were pretty much, heading in that direction by this time. The MCU, the movies of the MCU were so successful that I think the comic book industry suddenly became ripe for the kind of attention, the cultural attention that basically created the modern comic book, whatever it is. Anyway, but you could still find properties from writers that you knew, you could trust, that had a track record, and you could basically get those comics and enjoy them. You could ignore the new stuff. You could ignore things that went in the new direction that was not as, ideologically neutral as one would hope. But there were still things you could enjoy. But what 2016 did, it was seen as a declaration of war. And so suddenly everything was slanted. Everything was hostile. And everything was us versus them. Became partisan, became, there's a word for it. I'm trying to keep my, verbiage as neutral as possible. But let's just say that everything became kind of like the people who made the art were no longer making it for the fans or the people consuming the art. And that really came in around 2016. A almost suicidal distaste for the people who were going to consume the art or the product that you were going to put out. There was a famous punk performer named Gigi Allen. And Gigi Allen had nothing but contempt for the people who came to his concerts and bought his albums or whatever. He used to throw his own feces at them. I mean, he would do horrific things, and the crowd would kind of, cheer him on. The ones that didn't run for the door. But the thing about it was everybody knew he wasn't long for the world, and so the spectacle was kind of like the thing. And sure enough, he didn't last that much longer. But the thing about it was you can't do anything like that long term. You cannot. There's a symbiotic relationship that has to happen between the people making the art and the people who consume the art. Now, there's always been this kind of modern art ideal where people they would declare things art, and then they're like the emperor's new clothes kind of thing. Well, this is art. Okay, well, what's the price of it? Oh, it's $7 million. Okay, but I can say that I own this piece of art for $7 million. Okay, here's $7 million. And then there's kids with stuff on the refrigerator door that's better than what's on that canvas. Except because somebody paid $7 million for it, it suddenly became worth $7 million. And so that was always part of the culture. But the thing about it is, though, is something is only as valuable as what somebody's willing to pay for it. And so that's a niche thing, okay? And you've got a bunch of pretentious people sitting around saying, well, I don't want everybody to know that I don't understand this, because nobody really understands it. But by golly, the emperor has clothes, so I don't look as less sophisticated than the people I'm surrounded with. I'll, throw money at this banana taped to a board, or a picture of Jesus in urine, and things like that. And so, but the thing about it is art is only as valuable as what you're willing to pay for. And mass market art that model doesn't apply. And yet they took that philosophy of, we're just going to fake it till we make it. We're going to tell you this is art, and you're going to buy it because you don't want to seem less in our eyes. You don't want to seem less intelligent or less enlightened in our eyes. So you're going to consume this because we're going to bully you into it. We're going to guilt you into it. We're going to shame you into it. But the thing about it is that only works when people are afraid you're not going to like them. That only works when people feel like they're having to put on a front. And the majority of America doesn't feel that shame, doesn't feel that pressure, doesn't feel that need to placate people immediately in their immediate vicinity, but mainly because we don't live in these cities where all this art is being made. And so they stopped looking at the rest of the country and started looking at each other in the city centers and started making art based on those values that they found in each other, and just assumed that they could guilt, shame, insult, and bully everybody else into consuming the media. And that turned out to not be accurate. Got a comment over here. Who we got? Luxembourg. Like the Emperor's New Clothes, boy cried would come up less and less. I've noticed it become more and more necessary. Yeah, isn't that right? Yeah, it's interesting that those stories seem to have disappeared out of our zeitgeist. They seem to have disappeared out of our culture. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yes, indeed. Those stories have seemed to have evaporated somewhat. But yeah, so the philosophy that became the prevailing philosophy, and you're like, how in the world could this have happened? Because there's a funding source to force cultural change by a very powerful entity called BlackRock and another powerful entity called Vanguard. And through this, and by the way, our tax money, through this program called ESG, Environmental Social Governance. This is a program that they got from overseas, from Europe. And there's something called stakeholder capitalism that came in. It was no longer stockholder capitalism, it was stakeholder capitalism. And that was also a European model that came in. And so what happened was, suddenly these companies were forced, but through COVID funds particularly, but this was 4 years before COVID, this is ESG era. And so the ESG funds were available, and the ability to use banking systems, which ESG would prevent if you didn't follow the guidelines, kind of forced a cultural change on the people at large. And so suddenly everybody who had talent became like not the deciding factor. Quality was no longer the deciding factor. Art was being judged through the lens of ideology. Okay? You're no longer being cast for a role because you look like the source material said you should look, or because you fit the character, or you fit the historical president. You were being cast because these guidelines were saying that you had to have a certain amount of people of other diversities, of marginalized. Marginalized was the big word. Marginalized people. You had to have a bigger percentage of that before this money would be available to you. If you went by these guidelines, then the heavens would open, tax money would rain down upon you, and to the extent that you no longer had to care if people were consuming your product. That wasn't the concern anymore. It wasn't the goal, okay? And so what happened was, suddenly roles were being cast in ways that were unrecognizable, and plots were being rewritten. People were switching their bedroom priorities and trying to skirt around words that are going to get me my stream suppressed. I probably am too late, but for even talking about this stuff. But what happened was, when all these people were shoved out of the opportunities, okay, and this happened in music, this happened in printed media, this happened in television, movies, and storytelling in general, all storytelling media in general. Suddenly every single news outlet was pointed in another direction. It was basically they completely totally took mask off. Catherine Herridge, I think her name is, actually said, I no longer feel that I have to give equal time to both sides of an issue. She says, because I feel morally that I cannot give equal time to both sides of the issue anymore. And so this is like one of the big. She was doing this. I think it was the Pulitzer Prize. She was receiving a Pulitzer Prize when she made this speech, and this was back in 2018, where she basically just said, "I'm no longer going to give both sides a fair hearing." And the mask was off. Suddenly, all news media, including the night shows like the former Carson Letterman slots, the gentleman who took those slots, just declared, "I don't care if one side of the aisle even watches me. I don't care anymore." And so immediately they deliberately and quite gleefully cut out half of the society. And this all this was done deliberately, openly, declaratively, and proudly. So, what are these people going to do who are not going to go along with the program? What are the people going to do who are on this other ideological side of things, which got bigger and bigger and bigger the further left they went? And suddenly libertarians, people center, even center left, were basically no longer felt welcome. And so it became an extreme group of people, the ones that were hardcore all the way on the left. And they got the lion's share of the whole entire culture. All the music, all of the television, movies, comic books, printed media, everything suddenly had a left slant. All the whole entire mainstream went off the deep end. And they went off the deep end in that direction. Okay? So what was these people left behind supposed to do? We were supposed to go away. We were either supposed to convert, or we were supposed to go away. But there's a third option. See, they're making the assumption because they didn't feel like you could be creative. And I heard Bob Odenkirk say this on a podcast where he said, you can't be conservative and be creative. I heard him say that. Bob Odenkirk. And so they believed that there was one game in town. They believed that there was only one option. And if you wanted to consume any kind of entertainment, then you had to come through the door. The only door there was. And that's the door to Hollywood. That's the door to Madison Avenue. That's the door to DC or Marvel. That's the door to Disney, everything that Disney controlled. And so if you wanted to consume any kind of entertainment, any kind of media, any kind of escapist anything, then you had to either convert or your SOL. Just go away. But there's a third option. And that third option is create your own. And they didn't think that was possible. As a matter of fact, they used to taunt everybody. Well, if you don't like it, don't buy it. If you don't like it, don't consume it. If you don't like it, well, I guess just, screw you. Go away. But there's another option, and that option was we can make our own. So, in music, people started making music and using the internet to go straight to the people. John Rich used to be mainstream. He's part of the Lone Star Group, and then he was part of Big and Rich, and then he went on his own for solo. But once he went out on his own, once he left his record company and started doing his own stuff, he has had the most album sales of his whole entire life. And all that money goes straight to him. Tom McDonald did not sign to any kind of record company, any kind of outlet, to even an agent, and started releasing stuff directly online in hard media. Hired his entire family to pack CDs. And became a multi-millionaire. And is a household name. Even if you hate his guts, you know who Tom McDonald is. He's not one of the crowd. He's not one of the stable. He's distinct. He's unique. And, I don't always agree with what he has to say, but he certainly, he has a crowd. He has a bigger following than some of the mainstream people. And so the music, people, because the internet could go straight to people. And then printed media. Because, used to, it was like, oh, you have a book and it's a vanity press. Well, that's not really a book. You didn't go through a publisher, so you can't call yourself an author. And yet, people like Brandon Sanderson went straight to crowdfunding, made millions of dollars. And that money goes straight to him. And printing cost, except for the last 4 years, for reasons we won't go into, have lowered enough in quality. Quality printing has lowered enough that ordinary people could print their own stuff. And because of so many artists out there, people could get incredible book covers, incredible comic books, and send them directly to the people through crowdfunding. So when they shut out all this other people, they went around. And their profit margins are way, it takes a lot less to make more. And the news media, used to, there was like one controlled opposition channel, and that was Fox News. Then there's OAN, then there's Newsmax. But, the only one that was like big enough that it could take on the 4 big channels and CNN was Fox News. And it became bigger as a streaming channel. Suddenly it has bigger numbers than the free channels because it's offering another point of view. Now, granted, it's controlled opposition, and so I take everything with a grain of salt. But it gives perspective, you know. Then Elon Musk took over X, broke the monopoly there. Suddenly, I am better informed because I'm on X than any of my relatives, anybody at my church, anybody in my friend group, basically. They're like, I'll tell them things are going to happen, and they're like, well, I didn't hear about that. I was like, well, you will. And then a few days later, son of a gun, they'll come back to me and they're like, how did you know that? Well, because I'm on X. I pay attention. And so because the censorship was getting so bad on social media, this billionaire buying this one outlet was it basically broke the seal. And so now information has a free exchange, and they're trying to end that in Europe. Or trying to ban it in Europe. But the genie's out of the box, okay? So you got people that the industry's propping up, like Bad Bunny, who I hadn't heard much about at all. I listened to his music and I'm like, yeah, no. And he got the halftime show for the Super Bowl. And so what happened? Suddenly there's an announced alternative. And it aired the same time. And it brought in enough people. I mean, it wasn't going to outdo the Super Bowl. Super Bowl's too established. It's too massive. But they managed to peel off enough people to show it was viable. That wouldn't have happened before. And next year's is going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. So what is the state of the war? Well, the thing that won World War II was logistics. Yeah, everybody's like, oh, it's bravery. Yes, the bravery of the men did matter. The willingness of soldiers did matter. But ultimately, logistics. What I mean by that is replacement. It doesn't matter how much you have initially. You have to be able to replace it when it's destroyed. And Germany couldn't keep up. Japan couldn't keep up. Italy, anybody else involved couldn't keep up with the capacity of America. Okay? So what is ultimately going to win? The reason why this war here, this culture war, the reason why I believe it's already over is because the initial early stages, this takeover of our culture had all of the levers of power. They had the corporate levers. They had the infrastructure. They had all the outlets, all the distribution. But replacement. They didn't have the ability to replace what they're destroying. And so when you take something that is beloved, that has a fan base built in, and then you say, this thing that you love, we're going to destroy it right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it. You've got to be able to replace what you've destroyed. And because they have emphasized other things than meritocracy, because they have emphasized other criterion besides ability, because they did not have ability to replace what they were destroying, what they were burning down. What happens is the people who they kicked out, the creatives they sent to, or that they've sidelined, that they shut out of the progress, or shut out of the entire system. They're going to create. They're going to create free of the ideological constraints. They're going to create free of the shackles. They're going to create free of the, what is the word I'm looking for here? They're going to be able to create free of the indoctrination, free of the whole entire slant that culture had taken. They're going to be able to be free to tell stories. And story is a very fragile thing that can only exist in the absence of ideological bent, of the corruption of the political leanings of the people who are creating it. At the moment that you are in the art, you destroy the art. It no longer is art. You know, as soon as you involve yourself, your desires, your beliefs, your ideological bent into the art, it becomes an extension of you. It is no longer art. Excuse me. You have to be able to replace what you're destroying. They can't do that. The writers' rooms are full of activists, not creatives. The money has been flowing from financial people, not creative people. And all of the decisions are being made by politicians and political activists, not people who are wanting to make art. But on the other side, you have true creativity, you have true flexibility, you have ability to pivot, you have unfettered, information flow. You have people that are better informed. You have people that are better motivated. and you got people who want to tell stories. And AI has closed the gap in special effects. It's closed the gap in animation. It's closed the gap in ability to write scripts. You know, it's never going to replace script writing. Well, I mean, they're going to try to replace script writing. But for prompts, for rewrites and things like that, it's going to make everything more efficient. And so, because there's more creatives and more people trying to feed into the system, it's only a matter of time. Because they can have a writer's room of 5 people come up with something. But all 5 people are going to put their input in. And then that's going to go to the person who's directing, and they're going to put their input in. Then it's got to go through whatever apparatus, like Amazon, Sony, whoever, and it's going to have to go through their creative directors to get, and then eventually, after it's gone through all these hands and all these people giving their opinions and with their political bents, finally it gets to the public. And what it started out as, the pure idea, is long gone. Meanwhile, you got somebody writing with their heart in their hand, making a story that they want to see, and hitting publish. And because we have improved infrastructure and improved the ability for people to get to the public at large, that pure idea gets translated almost directly to the customer. Without all these hands, without all these apparatuses in place, it's not going to offend somebody who's not going to consume it in the first place. They cannot replace what they've destroyed. Like Japan, like Germany, they can't replace what they've destroyed. They don't have the ability. They don't have the resources. They don't have the technical know-how. So the music's going to get bad, get worse. I don't know how much worse it could get, but it's going to get worse. All of the television, movies, all of the secondary stuff, the news reporters are going to get dumber and dumber and easily debunked and corrupted. And we're going to know the free exchange of ideas is going to destroy the news media. People like Nick Shirley, people like Benny Johnson, going straight to the source, reporting on what's real, showing their homework. And it's inevitable. As a matter of fact, the war pretty much is already over. Because the mainstream is starting to pivot back. Out of self-defense, they're starting to pivot back. You know, there's a show called Night of the Seven Kingdoms. That is a throwback to old school storytelling. And there's no stunt casting. There's no sanitization. There's no lack of masculinity in it. It's basically pure storytelling. And people are it's resonating with people. People are sharing it. People are excited about it. It's getting buzz to the point where I think I'm going to have to find a way to watch it. But they're starting to pivot back. But out of defense, out of self-defense, out of the facing their own extinction, they're starting to pivot back. And like right now, good example. The Writers Guild is having a strike inside their office because there is a union of office workers that have decided to go on strike. So let's review. So the union is not on strike, but the people working in the office of the union are on strike. You see how convoluted that is. You see how counterproductive that is. You see how bloated that is. War is over. Right now, we're just wiping it, or just mopping it up. So, in the middle of that, more independence, more independent resources, more independent storytellers, more independent musicians, more independent writers, more independent artists, like Markiplier and Iron Lung. In 3,000, was able to be in 3,000 theaters, or 300 theaters, I can't remember. A lot of theaters. And he was able to compete with the big boys. YouTuber, using his own money, using his own customer base, the people who watch his stuff, his content, went to their theaters and said, please get Iron Lung. And they were able to get a nationwide release without a distribution company. Without a distributor. The war is over. At this point, it's just mop up. The war that Andrew Breitbart declared. The war that officially kicked off in 2016. Here we are, about 10 years later. And it's over. Now, there's been a lot of casualties. We've lost a lot of beloved franchises and IP, intellectual properties that were beloved. We lost fan bases, lost a lot, and we're still losing. My beloved Narnia is about to be desecrated by a radical feminist. And that's going to hurt. But somebody can make a new Narnia. And there's no barrier to it, to get to the people. The internet, X, those two things, social media and X, have broken the stranglehold. And now, All these other places, they're starting to follow suit. They're starting to allow more free speech. I mean, YouTube's doubling down, but there's free speech alternatives to YouTube now that weren't there before. And a lot of these places are starting to lower or to allow more free flow of information. They have to. They have to. They're facing extinction otherwise. The war is over. At this point, they just don't know it yet. They're going to course correct, but the damage has been done. You can, at some point, surrender. But it's like Ukraine. If the Ukrainians surrender at this point, all their cities are dead, and most of their young men are gone. And even if Russia declares a ceasefire, how many people have died out of Russia? How much destruction has been in Russia? The damage. There are things that can't be retrieved when you have a war. There are casualties. There are things that have been wiped out that will never be replaced. They're irreplaceable. All you can do is dig through the ashes, figure out what's left, and replace it. So the war's been costly. This culture war has been very costly. And we've lost a lot. But at the same time, the large energies that these IPs, these intellectual properties, had in people's lives have left wide open gaps for some new visions, for some new storytellers, from new stories to enter in and take the imagination of the culture. And we don't know what shape that's going to take yet. It's exciting. Mourn what we lost. Get excited for what we're about to gain. But what we've lost. And for why? And for what? Nobody said war is ever going to make any sense. And this one will never make sense. So R.I.P. all the fallen. This is ugly. This cost us a lot. And we're still paying. There's still skirmishes. Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant for evidently an hour. And I will see you all next time. This might be the last Gen X Files. I don't know. Seems like this will be a good place to stop. But either way, Bunny is still available, is still going to keep going. I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do with this Thursday night slot. But Saturday night is still Cryptids and Conspiracies. We've added some new blood with John's Lone Box And we've had some really good shows here lately. So that's going to be this Sunday night, or the Saturday night, 7 o'clock. We're going to talk about the Arctic Wall. What is beyond the Arctic Wall? And why is that the only treaty that all the nations agree upon every time it comes up for renewal? But that's what we're going to be talking about Saturday night, 7 o'clock. I hope to see you there. So until then, follow the White Rabbit. Come on. See if it's going to come up for me. All right. Bye, everybody.